After a historic loss in the Cotton Bowl, Sooners fall to 3-3 and return to Norman, seeking answers on how to match up with the Kansas Jayhawks of all teams. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast. I'm Adam Jacquez, and I'm joined by Tyler Burton and Corbin Polson this evening. Guys, it's been a rough 3 weeks for the Sooners, but I hope you're doing better than this team.
Do we really have to do this right now? Like, the last thing I want to do is talk about this game. I walked out of the game with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter on Saturday because my ride was ready to go. We had tickets to go see Morgan Wallen. It was a quick turnaround, so I had to get out of there a little bit early. But I walking out of the Cotton Bowl on Saturday, I thought, number one, there's no chance in hell that a rewatch is happening for this, and then number two, I cannot believe for the third week in a row we're gonna have to come on here and talk about an Oklahoma loss. But yeah, it's embarrassing right now. It's like walking on eggshells right now. It feels like the state of the program in Oklahoma right now, and we'll see. I don't think we've hit rock bottom yet, but you lose to Kansas on Saturday, rock bottom. That's where you're located.
Guys, I was like, does this team need a win? And I caught myself, and I just said, no, I think more than anything, this team just needs a touchdown. Like, let's just start small here. Let's just score. Like, even a field goal at this point. Like, I'd be pretty thrilled with. I don't know, guys. It's the ugliest game that I can remember since I've been probably watching OU football since, I'll be honest, probably 2000. I was 8 years old then. It's the last time I can remember actually watching games on TV. I think what is most frustrating about the Texas game, I don't think we were ever going to win that game, but there were opportunities in that game for us to be competitive. And we just like shit down our leg every single time there was an opportunity to pull the score in. I mean, the Davis Bevel, putting him back in after successfully running the Wildcat, I think it was in the first quarter, drive down the field, Davis Bevel goes back in, and all of a sudden, like, you get stopped on fourth down.
Twice.
The pop pass, when you're on 1st and 10 inside Texas's 30, you do a pop pass when you've been running it down Texas's throat for play after play. It's just bizarre, guys. I don't understand. Part of me realizes that's got to be tough on Jeff Lebby to run an offense that is not his. Part of me understands that. But when you have opportunities there to make that a game, at least early, to gain some confidence, to put points on the board against Texas, and you completely go away from everything that's working, you just got to shake your head. I don't know what else to do.
I think you've got to give Jeff Lebby and this offensive staff a little bit of credit because they knew. I mean, they can do the coach speak. They can talk about how, we did what we felt we had to do. Davis Bevel gave us the best chance to win. They knew going into that game on Saturday. If Dylan Gabriel wasn't going to play, which, by the way, Adam, we talked about it in pregame, that was the greatest warm-up session I think I've ever seen from a quarterback that was going to ultimately end up not playing. I had a little bit of confidence going into the game, especially once we saw Gabriel going through warm-ups. I thought, okay, this team's going to come out. Gabriel's going to play. There's going to be some life within this team now that they've got their starting quarterback back. But once I saw him come out, had the pads off, had the baseball cap on, from that point forward, I knew that there was virtually no chance Oklahoma was going to win this game. But give Jeff
point,
Lebby,
guys? If you don't mind me asking, what was the point?
Just gamesmanship. That's all it is. They knew he wasn't going to play on Wednesday.
It doesn't change strategy. It does not change Texas's strategy and how they approach this team. It didn't change anything for them. So I don't know why they went through that whole charade for nothing, really.
Texas's defense would have had to have, one, the respect factor, Dylan Gabriel versus Davis Bevel in terms of the opposing team's defense. But yeah, I think that from a schematic standpoint, Texas probably would have had to do some things differently, especially on the back end of the defense in coverage. Davis Bevel couldn't throw the ball. 6-12, 38 yards. His first pass, look, it was a duck. It was literally the worst throw that I've probably ever seen a Division I college football player make. And there was, from the moment that Davis Bevel went out there, I know that Oklahoma did some good things on the Wildcat, especially that second drive, drove it all the way down there deep into Texas territory. Why, for the life of me, after doing 7 or 8 consecutive Wildcat plays where they were moving the ball successfully, they throw Bevel back in there at 3rd and 2, give it to Eric Ray, boom, get stuffed. 4th and 1, okay, you've got Davis Bevel, let's split him out wide. No, we're actually going to run the read option here, and he's going to get stuffed. So I'm not quite. We'll talk about it here in a minute, kind of big picture when talking about our thoughts on the coordinators, this coaching staff. But I've got to at least applaud Jeff Lebby because he knew going into this game, Davis Bevel gave this offense no chance over a 4-quarter game against a Quinn Ewers Texas offense. So give him some credit for going Wildcat and Oklahoma had no chance winning this game on Saturday. Completely outmatched from start to finish.
My question is, how is that possible? How at the University of Oklahoma do you not have a quarterback on your roster to complete a 10-yard throw? How is that
Exactly.
possible?
So Davis Bevel had 26 plays under center and only produced 53 yards from handing the ball off, from running it himself, or from passing it. I think he had 38 total yards passing.
Yep.
He was ineffective in throwing a screen pass or a swing pass of any kind. He really couldn't throw the ball. I think he had 2 passes the entire game that were over 10 yards down the field. One was an incompletion to Marvin Mims. One was the Hail Mary, interception to Jalil Farouk. I don't fault him for that. At least they allowed him to throw it down the field and give the receiver a chance in that situation. But it could have been Nick Evers who was standing out there handing the ball off or standing in the Wildcat. It could have been Braden Willis doing that. It could have been Jeff Lebby himself that was out there on the field doing that. And the results would have been basically the same. And that is infuriating as a fan, that you can't find someone, or at least try someone, that could at least throw a swing pass. It's not a hard pass to do. There's tons of high school quarterbacks that can do that. Bevel was unable to do that. And they didn't even allow him the opportunity to try to throw the ball, really. They just said, you know what? You can't throw it. We're just going to try to run it the entire game. And when it was in the Wildcat, it was somewhat effective. But then they kept mixing back into the normal offense, where the defense knew that Bevel was going to hand it off, or he didn't have the ability to run after the read. So it was almost like a give up strategy, in my opinion.
Guys, Texas had more points than Oklahoma had passing yards. Think about that for a second.
I think it's tough though, because you saw Evers come in late, and like the one pass he threw is like, oh well, makes sense why he's behind Bevel. It's all bad. It's all bad, and that it just doesn't answer the question: how at the University of Oklahoma do you not have a guy who can complete a swing pass? I don't know how it's possible.
Is that Evers, more on?
He could have at least 50% of the time read the read option right and potentially have picked up yards running, because Bevel was not a running threat. Right. So like if you put Evers in, you at least get the same result at minimum, in my opinion, because Bevel did pretty much nothing. And it's sucks for him. Like, I know he sucks. He's getting a lot of criticism thrown his way, and it's the coaches putting him in a bad position to succeed. I thought Lebby, he did some good things with the Wildcat, but he didn't slow the pace down nearly as much as he should have. He didn't put Bevel in an opportunity to succeed. And there's been a lot of discussion as, is this the players? Is it the coaches? And I think early on, against TCU and against K-State, it probably was the players not showing up with the toughness and mentality that they needed to. But the longer this goes on, the more it's on the coaches, because you can complain all you want about the talent that you have, but if you don't put the players in the position to succeed, that's coaching failure.
Guys, they see what we see, and they look out there in the practice field, and they literally look at all the quarterbacks and be like, don't have a chance.
Guys, I think that the biggest offensive criticism that I've heard over the last few days is, why do we continue on with Davis Bevel and not try another quarterback early in the first half, or even come out of the gate in the second half on Saturday? Somebody tell me what the alternative was. General Booty, yes, I think they were anticipating on him being available to play, but I think it was Parker Thune that reported that he had an allergic reaction. He was having trouble seeing out of one of his eyes. I can vouch for that. I sat 15 or 18 rows up from behind the bench. There were multiple occasions where the training staff was coming over and looking at his eye. It looked like he had something in it. So it was giving him trouble. But guys, do we really want to trot out Nick Evers at this point in the season in that game? A true freshman with 0 snaps, still isn't comfortable in this offense from everything that we've heard from Jeff Lebby, who isn't ready to play. Let's throw him out there in the Cotton Bowl against Texas in the biggest game of the year, because if we do that, guys, I think that there's a serious possibility that there's a huge risk that you set this kid way back in his development as a college quarterback, that he might not ever be the same coming out of it. And aside from that, guys, yes, Davis Bevel didn't play well. Davis Bevel shouldn't be playing quarterback at a place like Oklahoma. And to be honest, guys, Davis Bevel should never see the field in an Oklahoma uniform. God forbid if that actually has to happen again, because Oklahoma's not winning a single football game if Dylan Gabriel's not playing quarterback this year. But realistically, who expected Davis Bevel to play well against Texas? This guy was a career backup at Pitt. Oh, and by the way, he was going against a defense on Saturday that made Bryce Young look average for 3.5 quarters just a few weeks ago. So again, were our expectations in Davis Bevel too high? I think it's a little bit unfair, the criticism that Jeff Lebby and this offensive staff they've gotten the last 3 days.
I think it's totally fair. I think it goes back to exactly what Adam was talking about. It may not have gotten better, but it couldn't have gotten worse. And so having a quarterback that has some mobility at least keeps the Texas defense honest. And the 2 throws that Davis Bevel threw downfield, I could make the throws. He just chucked it up. And so you might as well throw in somebody that I kind of get your point of like you don't want to ruin a kid early, but as long as Gabriel's in the offense, Evers is not going to play anymore. So all this is an experience opportunity for him to come in, use his legs, keep the Texas defense honest. You're telling me that he couldn't have done more with his legs than what Davis Bevel did? Because you can't compare arms because there's no comparison. He threw for 30-something yards. Anybody can do that in a college uniform. And I don't remember who tweeted it, but the amount of backup quarterbacks that had good weeks last week, win or loss, that were throwing for multiple 100 yards, I don't know.
San Diego State's quarterback was a safety that converted. He was a quarterback in previous years, but converted back to quarterback this week and threw for over 300 yards, albeit against a bad Hawaii team. But I mean, if Nick Evers if we're saying, oh, he's going to bounce past everything that he throws at this point, then he basically has no hope going forward to ever be an effective quarterback. So we saw one throw. That's such a small sample size. I know he looked rattled in the spring game. It didn't look ready then, but I think you at least have to give him a chance, or somebody else, or even ask Bevel to actually throw it down the field more often. Just throwing the ball up and let some guys like your best players in Farouk and Mims have a chance to come down with the ball. You probably get a lot more turnovers that way, but the game was over in the second quarter. So the entire rest of the strategy, maybe even in the first quarter, but the entire rest of the strategy, the rest of the game was just basically a give up mentality of we're just going to run the clock out and tuck our tails between our legs and go home. And that just is not acceptable at the University of Oklahoma. You have to keep trying something.
Yeah, when it was 21-0, the game was over. The game was virtually over at that point right now because there was no way in hell that Oklahoma was going to be able to, come back and score 21, much less keep up with Texas's offense throughout the rest of the game. But, guys, I talked about it on the, here just a little bit ago, applauding Jeff Lebby for him recognizing the fact that the backup quarterback position in Oklahoma is such a liability right now that was the result of us having to get the game plan or put the Wildcat formation in the game plan where you're handing it off to Jill Farouk, you're handing it off to Eric Gray from Braden Willis. But I will say this, and this is one thing that I will criticize. I can understand if when you're running the Wildcat, if it's just a simple one-off, like, okay, this is just a quick change of pace play to get the defense on their heels a little bit. Yes, you keep the quarterback out wide, but there was a stretch in this game on Saturday, and we'll have to go back and take a look at the statistics for it. But Oklahoma ran the Wildcat play 8 straight times. Davis Bevel was lined up out wide all 8 times. 3 of those 8 times, Oklahoma ran the ball to his side of the field. Texas had absolutely no respect for him. They knew that he wasn't going to be catching the football. Why in that situation, instead of it being 10 on 11, why not get another receiver in there? Why not get another fullback? Bring somebody else in on the line of scrimmage to help in the running game. I just thought that
the defense can't sub. That's your answer.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't know. That was just to me, I just don't understand that. 10 on 11, that was a liability having him out there, whether he was lined up out wide at receiver or him being lined up at quarterback actually taking the snap. Davis Bevel was a liability for Oklahoma on Saturday. And I hate to say that about the kid, but when you're at a place like Oklahoma, when you sign up to play quarterback at a school like this, with the tradition and the history of the success of quarterbacks that have played in this program, that's what you sign up for. You sign up for being able to go out there on Saturday, and your performance is going to dictate how people write about you, how people talk about you. That's just the nature of the beast playing at OU.
I think things are pretty bad when Texas beats OU 49-0, and no one even uttered the phrase "Texas is back," because this game was a referendum on OU, not Texas. Yep. So a program that has been wandering in the wilderness for over a decade now and still hasn't officially made it back to the upper echelon of college football annihilates OU, yet can't put too much stock into that win. Why? Because, over the course of 3 weeks, this football team has been completely destroyed, dismantled, and mentally defeated, honestly. I mean, 48.3 points per game, 12 rushing touchdowns, over 300 yards allowed rushing on the ground. This is just anemic football that the Sooners are playing, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which we haven't touched on as much, but maybe that's something we should actually spend some time addressing.
Adam, when Texas scored to go up 35-0, I had a Texas fan. It was a couple sitting right in front of me in the OU section, and as soon as Texas scored, he high-fived his girlfriend, and he was like, babe, I literally can't enjoy this as much as I want to because OU is that bad. Like yes, it was satisfying for Texas just because they've lost they've lost 10 out of the last 13, so that's a good win. Quinn Ewers coming back. Anytime that you can hang 50 on Oklahoma, that's a big time accomplishment for your program. I don't care who you are, but yeah, that I still think that there was a lack of satisfaction for Texas fans walking out of the Cotton Bowl on Saturday, but. I mean, it doesn't get any easier. We think that Kansas is going to be a gimme. They've been a layup for this team, basically every year since 2000, with the exception of 2007. But guys, OU defense giving up over 48 points a game the last 3 weeks. They've been outscored 104-24 in the last 2 games against TCU and Texas. In the last 3 weeks, since Big 12 conference play started, Oklahoma is ranked dead last by over 100 yards in rushing defense, giving up 6.7 yards a carry, over 310 on the ground a game. It's just bad. Like I've never, as an Oklahoma fan, I'm 28 years old, been following it for, the better part of the last 20. I've never seen an Oklahoma football team as down as they are right now.
The question is like, why is it this bad? I think
it's the roster.
But it can't be. That can't be the answer. Because I get that the roster's depleted. I understand what left for the NFL draft on the defensive side of the ball. I understand what left to USC on the offensive side of the ball. I really do. But it can't be this bad where we are just not even capable of being competitive. I'm not even talking about winning games at this point. I'm talking about being competitive. I cannot get behind the rosters that bad. I can't. I don't know why. I don't know the solution, but I can't get behind that. Like, this team is bad enough to lose to TCU like they did and to get shut out against Texas. I can't get there.
So if you are a subscriber to Sooner Scoop, which you should be if you're an OU fan, there is a poster on there that over the course of the last couple of years, even before Lincoln Riley left, had been basically going through the depth chart, recruiting class by recruiting class, and talking about how guys that either left the program, transferred, whatever, didn't ever make it to campus potentially, or maybe have just been sitting there and not developing or doing anything. I won't name names, but you guys know who we're talking about there. But it is astounding to see just the attrition rates that the Lincoln Riley classes had and how that depth really deteriorated. And I think when you compound that with, okay, all these new guys are going to transfer in, a majority of them from the group of 5, a guy like Jeffrey Johnson, for example, that Tyler, I know, was really high on at the beginning of the year, that is, I don't even know if he classifies as just a guy. He's been pretty non-existent in my opinion, but there's guys like that littered all over this program. And I've resisted for a long time because I don't want to blame Lincoln Riley. I do think that there is enough talent in Oklahoma, regardless, that, this should be a much better product, just like you said, Corbin, there. But I think we're really starting to see that there's no depth behind some guys. Like, we were excited about Ethan Downs. We were excited about Reggie Grimes. And those guys were okay through the first couple of games.
Non-existent.
Like, once those guys drop, you're going to a transfer from Hawaii. And then, I don't know, Clayton Smith, who doesn't really fit the scheme. So there's nothing behind those guys. And I think that's kind of the case across the entire defense, because even though we say, yes, we want to see more Jaron Kanik, that's one guy. Like, where else are you going for some of those other positions that you really need playmakers at? And there's just not guys there. But then at the end of the day, you have to put those guys in a position to succeed. And I don't think that they're doing that.
But Adam, you've given up almost 150 points in 3 weeks. How bad does it have to get before you start to see some of the younger guys out there?
But if they didn't do anything on Saturday, they had a few snaps late and it looked the exact same.
Okay, well,
they weren't even going up against the starters.
I know, but the game's essentially over at that point. All I'm saying is, with all things being equal, the senior versus the freshman, play the freshman. That's the future of the program. You can deal with the growing pains of the 17, 18-year-old kid. That's the future program. He's going to get better as time goes on. He doesn't have any bad habits from the previous staff. So here, his only impressions as an Oklahoma football player is what Brent Venables is doing at Oklahoma right now. So with all things being equal, and maybe this is something that they're waiting to do until after the bye week in 2 weeks, but you've got to make some major changes personnel-wise because the 2023 season, it's done. You can't win the Big 12. Honestly, this is a must-win game this weekend for OU to even have a dream of playing in a bowl game in 2 months. That's where we're at in Norman right now. So I don't know. There's been so much talk. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I will say too, like, yes, the freshmen might come in and they might be just as bad, but it's the same thing with Nick Evers. Like, we could have thrown any warm body out there to hand the ball off to Eric Gray 20 times. It's the same kind of conversation. This defense mentally,
not at quarterback
physically,
though.
well, no, hear me out here.
I think
like,
quarterback's
this
different than
defense is
putting
just
in like
mentally and
freshman
physically
form.
like. Yeah, so in regards to like the defense, like the freshmen are the guys that are going to have the juice. They're going to be excited to play on the field. You know, give it their all, 100% max effort. They're going to make mistakes, but you know, they're going to be engaged and excited to play. And I just don't see that from this defense right now. There was a couple times where it felt like they kind of let up on, you know, a guy that was running down the field. They wanted to tackle him, but didn't really want to hit him. So they just kind of like arm tackled him and the guy ran through it. So at least the freshmen will be amped to be out there on the field. And I think this team needs some of that juice right now.
But where was the juice late? If it doesn't matter the type of game, if it doesn't matter
You're down
the score. No. If
you're down 50-0.
If you're a freshman, the juice is the same.
I thought there
at
was,
least if you're down 40, like you have nothing to lose. Nothing.
I thought there was some improvements late in the fourth quarter, but it was just
I
like
can't
two
say I wasn't
drives that
there.
we saw. Yeah.
I
I mean,
didn't even watch. Classic.
yeah. So let me ask you about this one, because Brent Venables had an interesting quote or an interesting question posed his way in the press conference today. We're recording on Tuesday, where someone basically asked him about what, you know, he saw from Justin Broyles, being that Broyles was a lightning rod for the fan base. And Brent Venables essentially went on this long answer of like, why would anyone spend an ounce of effort, you know, being concerned about him when all he does is give everything he has to the program and could have gone anywhere in the country, but just works really hard. And I'm like, Brent, you just don't get it. Like, everyone loves Justin Broyles for, you know, the way he loves OU. The same way that we love Baker Mayfield for the way he loved OU.
Pat
The
Fields.
difference that Pat Fields is a similar guy, like a great dude, I'm sure. Would love to have Broyles be on staff. I think he could be valuable to OU in a number of ways once his playing career is over. But the difference between a Justin Broyles and a Baker Mayfield is one guy makes tons of plays on the field and the other guy doesn't. At least he hasn't this year. I know at the tail end of last year, he started playing good and he started to get some recognition from fans, rightfully so. But whether it's Broyles or David Agwebu or whoever else that is the scapegoat, like, working hard and loving this program is not enough. All of us here on this podcast and all people that listen to this podcast love OU. We're not all playing at OU for athletic and physical reasons that, you know, are limitations for us. So you have to actually make plays. And I just feel like there's a disconnect there with what the coaches are valuing and the actual result on the field.
But what do you want him to say?
He can't throw his guys under the bus.
Like, that's the thing. We've gone back to it for a couple weeks straight. Is like, what do you want them to say?
He didn't have to go on that long tirade about like, you shouldn't criticize him, essentially. Like,
Adam,
he could have gone in a totally different direction.
You got to protect your guys.
You got to protect your guys. And Adam, that's a conversation that's going to be had in the off season at the conclusion of December. Once the games are over, once you have to start thinking about Team 129, moving on to 2023. You know, guys, there's been a lot of talk, especially over the last 3 weeks, of, you know, Oklahoma's defense's inability to stop the run. They were able to do that for the first 3 weeks, and now the last 3 weeks, it's gone to hell. Does Oklahoma run the 30 front? Does Oklahoma get into a 4-man down front? There's been a ton of criticism about the defensive scheme Venables and Ted Roof have deployed. But guys, I want to ask you this, and, you know, get both of your thoughts after I make this point. What's the alternative? Do we simply run another defense that will not be the permanent defense for the long haul just to try to win a couple of ball games? I don't think so. Keep installing and continuing on getting better, playing the type of defense that has won Brent Venables 3 national championships in his time as a defensive coordinator. The proof's in the pudding. We know that once he gets his guys, once he has time to be able to install this and get the athletes in there that fit this system, it works. I'll take a 6-6 season this year, knowing we're building the culture and implementing the system that's going to get us back to that high standard that we're so used to at the University of Oklahoma.
So I think you have to pick a side. Either you adjust to this defense's strengths and keep playing the guys you're playing, or keep your system and let the young guys get experience. Pick one.
I'll take the
Because
latter.
and I think most Sooner fans would, but that's the frustration I think at this point is not only are we not changing the defense to fit the strengths of the defense, but we're not playing the younger guys either. So guys who aren't even going to be here next year are out there basically shitting the bed, and we refuse to put young guys in to train them, to equip them to get better heading into next season. That's the stuff to me that doesn't make any sense.
And I think that's where, depending on the outcome this weekend, having a bye week next weekend, that's when I
I
think
don't
that
know.
you're going to start. Coaches are going to have to start really having those tough conversations with players, because it's clear, guys. People that have been on campus playing football for OU for the last 3 to 4 years are simply not getting it done at this point. So, what more can you do as a coaching staff to try to get more out of those players that have already been here for the
How
last
much
3 to
worse
4
does it have
years?
to be?
That's what I'm saying. How
If
much
it
worse
didn't
does it have
happen
to be?
no. If it didn't happen last weekend, if it does not happen this upcoming week against Kansas, what's it going to take?
Yeah, but if
You
there's one
just
thing that
lost
we've
49 to
seen,
nothing.
I know, I get that, but if there's one thing that we've seen over the last few years, bye weeks are usually when a coaching staff chooses to make the bulk or chooses to make the bigger changes within their roster, because it gives you that extra week of preparation
I
to get
don't
the
think
young
we
guys
saw
ready.
that in the past few years in Norman.
I would say too, it gives them more time to review and reflect and make a decision over a longer period of
Recruit.
time. Not necessarily because of, oh, this is the time where we have the most time to prepare a guy. I'll say, as far as the defense goes, this is probably the third week in a row I've said this. I think I would like to see more man coverage from this unit. I think that will put guys in better chance to succeed.
Did
We
you
saw
watch
Quinn
TCU?
Ewers. Well, here's why I say that, because Quinn Ewers in the Texas offense basically ran several times where they would do max protect, run two routes. Two routes. OU would drop 6 or more players to cover those two guys, and Quinn Ewers would just sit back in the pocket waiting for his receiver to make that long cross across the field, right between the safety, the deep coverage, and the linebackers, that medium term coverage, and he would just drop it in. And I've seen that far too many times over the last couple of weeks. I'm not saying go exclusively to man. I'm not saying abandon what Brent Venables is pushing for, but mix in some stuff that can help your guys succeed. You have to put your guys in position to succeed. And so I'm not the defensive expert. He is, but like, it's not working. We've had 3 weeks in a row of, okay, I don't know if it needs to be simplified, but you need to put your guys in a position where they can be successful until they can fully implement his system.
Guys,
I agree. I agree.
Is Ted Roof on staff next season?
No, Ted
No.
Roof's the fall guy. He'll get fired at the end of this year, because that's the way that Brent's able to save face with the bulk of the recruits right now. And that's also kind of another problem that I have with Brent, with the way that everything's kind of being handled right now. The first 3 weeks of the season, if you watch Brent Venables along the sideline when the OU defense was out there, he was very engaged. He was the one making the calls, getting it into his guys. That's another thing we talk about too. Ted Roof can't get a call in on time to the defense. That's been a problem each of the last couple of weeks. But yeah, I don't think that I don't think he'll be on staff next season. His son's going to be graduated. He's going to be out of the program. What really, outside of him maybe being an elite recruiter, what use does he have? This is going into next season. If ultimately OU continues down the path that they're on right now, whether it's a 6-6, 5-7 type year to close out 2022, honeymoon phase is over. Next year, Brent's not going to have as much slack, I think, in terms of the big money donors, because going into the SEC in the next couple of years, you don't want to be a wounded duck walking into the SEC conference with some of the programs that are playing really, really good football right now. And that's another thing, guys, that we haven't talked about too. The SEC, it's not just Alabama and Georgia. There's a lot of really, really good teams across both divisions in the Southeastern Conference. So, yeah, I don't think that Ted will be on staff next year, and you got to
Who's the
get somebody
DC?
else. It's Brent. It's got to be Brent.
I don't think you can.
But okay, but explain why to me. Lincoln Riley, Ryan Day, they're both the head coach. They both call plays.
I think it's different on the offensive side of the ball.
I would say Ted Roof can stick around for the next Ladies' Day next summer, but then Todd Bates is probably your defensive coordinator, in my opinion. He knows the system really well. Todd Bates. I think it's a promotion for him in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
so it's another reason to keep him.
He's co-DC right now, right?
I believe he
is
has
he co-DC?
Something like that, or maybe like
Yeah.
assistant head coach or something along those terms. But he's not taking the blame. He's not taking the load there. So yeah, I would go with Bates.
Guys, this is a very generic question, but we've got 6 games left. What do you do? Seriously, what do you do?
Win 3.
I
I
think
understand
these next
that,
two games
but
are the most critical. Yeah, beating Kansas and then beating Iowa State. Those are two of the weaker. Well,
Tech.
say that Kansas. I mean, as good as they are, still a
I
talent
don't,
deficiency.
I don't see
Dean
them
almost.
winning in
Hey,
Lubbock.
I know Kansas's quarterback is out this week. Dean almost beat us last year.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, guys. I was texting a buddy back and forth, and he said this year's roster is no different than last year's outside of a generational quarterback.
I agree.
Kennedy Brooks was pretty good. I'd say he's still better than what we have in the backfield. And the defensive line, defensive players there were better.
Is this what the 2017, 18, 19 teams look like if Baker, Kyler, and Jalen are playing quarterback in Norman?
Especially Kyler's year.
Yeah, I've been asking myself that question a lot. Is like, I think it kind of happened when David Hicks committed to A&M. Is like, okay, I need to take a step back and realize that this program that I thought was on that second tier right below Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, are they even lower than that second tier? Because I wonder did Lincoln Riley just have lipstick on a pig the entire time he was here, basically having top 5 QBs that bailed him out of every single situation? And this is what OU really was the last couple of years. And I think that's probably true. And that really hurts to say. That hurts because I want OU to become Alabama, but now I realize we're even further away than where I thought we were.
And this is where I go back to the personnel on the roster. I think that Lincoln saw what he had in the Switzer Center a year ago. He knew what was coming down the pipeline with the recruiting class that was going to be joining this program from a year ago. He knew that his time was running out. He wasn't going to be able to continue to get by with elite quarterback play. You know, if Caleb Williams is in Norman right now, this team's probably 5-1, 4-2 at worst. You're probably beating Kansas State. You're definitely a lot more competitive each of the last couple of weeks. But and by the way, Todd Bates, co-defensive coordinator, associate head coach. So he's already got some pretty big responsibility. If you want to continue to keep him in Norman, that may not be a bad promotion to just slide him up into there. If he understands the passing game as a defensive coordinator with coverages, rotations, and things like that. But guys, one more point here that I do want to ask you guys. What's your pulse on the fan base right now? Are you okay with how this fan base is reacting? Is it warranted? Are we a bunch of crying babies that don't know how to act when when things aren't going our way? What's your pulse on the fan base right now? Because I think mine's probably pretty different than your guys.
Welcome to every other college fan base outside of about 3. Welcome, because we've been spoiled to death with amazing quarterback play, and we have been super fortunate. I've been watching since I can remember OU football for 22 years. I've never, ever seen it this bad. Now, for the people who can get back to the John Blake era, I think we're in a relatable time. But unfortunately, with a national brand like OU, you're going to get people that hop on, and they've hopped on ever since 2000, and they've ridden the wave of, at worst, we've won 7 games a year at worst. I think that has been probably the worst year that we've had. Welcome to every other college football fan base. Better get used to it, because we're not going to do. We've said this for a long time, guys. As soon as we accepted the invitation to join the SEC, we've been very consistent, all 3 of us, in the fact that we are not going to have the same success in the SEC that we have in the Big 12. We're not. Did any of us expect us to see this much of a dip? Probably not. But I think this is what the majority of fan bases of college football have to deal with. And unfortunately, it's one of those years where we're really going to test the fandom of a lot of people. I will say this as kind of my last point on this topic. This overall could be a very, very good thing for the OU fan base. If we can be humbled and humiliated and have to endure this for a couple years, and then we actually get back to where I think most people think Brent Venables is going with this team, I think that creates a different home environment. I think that creates a better overall atmosphere within the stadium. I think people would be more hungry for that success, and not just going to the playoff, but hungry for the success of we're after a national championship for real. I think this could be an overall good thing for the OU fan base.